Everyone to our annual Big East Basketball Roundtable. We appreciate your attendance. We're excited to have three terrific panels for you today. And before we get to those panels, we have some opening remarks from Big East Commissioner Val Ackerman. Val?
Thanks, John. Welcome, everybody. Thanks a lot for coming out. I, too, want to welcome everybody to our 5th annual Big East Roundtable. Exciting and important event for us. This is our annual opportunity to gather experts and talk about some of the key challenges and opportunities in higher education, intercollegiate athletics, and, of course, the great sport of basketball. I want to thank all of our participants for coming. We know you're busy. Really, really appreciate your being here today. I want to especially thank 2 of our Big East presidents who are going to be participating on our first panel, Father Peter Donahue from Villanova and Dr. Michael Lovell from Marquette. Thanks to you both for making time to be here today. The focus, and they'll be part of our first panel, which will be moderated by my friend Jack Ford. The second 2 panels, you'll hear more about in a moment, but I just wanted to say that given the current developments over the last couple of months in men's basketball, we think this is a particularly relevant topic. The focus will be on the journey that young men's basketball players make as they transition from their days in youth basketball to travel teams, to high school basketball, to college basketball, to schools like the ones we have here in the Big East Conference, and then to the NBA and beyond. As many of you know, there's been a lot of commentary over the last several months on that topic, and we thought that it would be very instructive to hear from these players and former players and some of the people closest to them, and to see what they have to say about that. So I, for one, I'm really looking forward to the insights that you're going to be hearing from the folks who are with us. And so with that, it's my great pleasure to turn things over now to our Master of Ceremonies today, our Senior Associate Commissioner for Men's Basketball, Stu Jackson. Thanks, Stu.
Thanks a lot, Val, and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you on my behalf for attending, as Val mentioned, our 5th annual Big East Roundtable. I just want to set the stage here just a bit before we get started. As Val mentioned, we've gathered what I consider some sports leaders, some former men's basketball student athletes. Obviously our presidents are here today. To really discuss education, the student athlete, and the challenges and pressures that they face along their journey, and how they transition from high school to college and even beyond. And we're going to use a 3-panel format up here in front, and we'll hear perspectives from, as I mentioned, our Big East presidents. We have a parent of one of our student athletes here today, which they'll be introduced later. We have a very prominent high school coach, a very prominent basketball administrator, and some Big East alumni. We're going to hear from our presidents first in a panel titled The View from the Top. And it's really a conversation about the role of athletics in higher education and how institutions can best serve the needs of student athletes and the importance of Big East, of basketball to the Big East Conference. The panelists for that first panel are Reverend Peter Donahue, otherwise known as Father Peter from Villanova University, and Dr. Michael Lovell from Marquette University. That panel will be moderated by Jack Ford, and Jack is back here for the 2nd year. He's a very prominent writer, teacher, and an Emmy Award-winning journalist. We will also have the opportunity to hear from a panel discussing the mentoring of the student athlete. And on that panel, we'll be discussing how student athletes navigate the recruiting process, their academics, their development as a player, both prior to college and in college, and the roles that all of those people play in our student athletes' lives. We have with us today Savina Kale, who is the mother of one of our student athletes, Miles Kale at Seton Hall University, Krishna Vada, who's a national level high school coach, who is the head coach and principal at the Patrick School in New Jersey. And then finally, we have with us Boo Williams. I happen to know Boo for 35 years. I don't want to date myself, but Boo is a board member for the National AAU organization. That panel will be moderated by Dave Popkin. Dave is a veteran New York sportscaster. He's also the color commentator for Seton Hall basketball on radio for 15 years and has called many women's basketball and baseball games on the Big East digital network since the beginning of that network. Dave also is the CEO of the event management company named Hilltop Management. And finally, our third panel is about preparing to be a professional. And on this panel, we'll focus in on discussion about the opportunities that former Big East student athletes have helped them transition into successful professional lives. The panelists on the third panel will be Tony Chennault, who's a former Villanova player who operates his own film production company. And just a special shout out to Tony because he literally had just an hour taking away from a film that he's producing up in the Bronx, so we appreciate him being here. Nate Lubick, a former Georgetown player who works in finance here in the city, down on the street. And Arturas Karnišovas, who I've also known personally for a very long time. Arturas is a former Seton Hall player who is currently the general manager of the NBA's Denver Nuggets. Dave Popkin will moderate that panel also. So before we begin, I just would like to welcome all of you, both from the media, the students, and I think by attending today, you'll be interested in hearing what promises to be three very good panels. So first up, I'd like to introduce Jack Ford, who will introduce our first panel.
Stu, thank you, and welcome to all of you. As he mentioned, this is my second opportunity to sit down and have this conversation with some presidents from the Big East. We did it last year. I do a lot of traveling. I do some work as a consultant for the Ncaa, so I travel around the country and have conversations and dialogues and town hall meetings about issues that are percolating in the midst of college athletics. And I found this, that we did last year, to be one of the most revealing and provocative and enjoyable sessions I've ever involved with, because we tend to hear from everybody except the presidents. And we realize the role that the presidents play and the influence and how everything comes, as we know, from the top down. So I thought it was a fabulous opportunity last year. When Val asked me again this year, I was delighted to be part of it. And we're thrilled to have both Father Peter and Dr. Lovell here to engage in these conversations. So I hope you enjoy it also. Let me start off with sort of some personal thoughts and observations. And then, of course, we have issues, bigger pictures that we can talk about. But I'm curious for both of you, your expectations and your visions for the role that athletics, and let's talk about specifically basketball, should play within your university community. Father Peter, let me start with you, because you had been at Villanova for a long period of time.
Yes.
Before you became
Before I became
the president.
yes.
Exactly. So it's different. It's always very different. People don't realize that. No matter how high up you are, once it's the presidential level, your vision has to be different. How did you envision the role of athletics in general and basketball in particular at Villanova when you assumed the presidency back in 2006?
Prior to 2006, I don't think I went to a Villanova game at all. I mean, I didn't attend any of the sporting events. I was chair of the theater department.
An award-winning theater department, we should say.
I had other things to be worried about, and you know, it wasn't. I think once a year they invited me to sing the national anthem at the basketball game. So that was about it.
A little bit better than Fergie, I hope.
Right. So in 2006, when I suddenly became the president, you know, it was part. It's an essential part of the university. It is a huge gathering of alumni, and you know the job of the president is to connect to those alumni and gather those alumni back into the fold. You know, keep them connected to the university. So I suddenly realized how important it was, and how much I now attend games. And not only men's basketball, but all of them. You know, we have 24 sports, so I don't get to all of them as much as I'd like to, but it is a huge part of who we are. And really of keeping the alumni engaged in the university, because they follow it. You know, they come to game watches, they come to events, you know, so it becomes a very important part. I tell the athletes all the time, and this is to all of them, not just the men and women's basketball programs, but they are probably the first people that many people will meet from Villanova University. You know, from whatever team they may be on, from airports to rest stops along the highway to train stations, to, you know, they go out with Villanova written all over them. And how they act, how people perceive them, how people see them interact with each other, how they see them dealing with people around them, really says something more about the university than most people would ever know about it. So they are, to me, the biggest ambassadors to Villanova University because of the number of people. And now with the Big East, I mean, they're going from, you know, Philadelphia to Omaha, Nebraska. You know, so they travel a lot. And they need to be ambassadors of the university.
Dr. Lovell, how about you? 2014, you become the president of Marquette. What then was your vision? And how did it possibly change once you were in that seat that Father Peter talked about, where your view of everything has to be different?
Yeah. So obviously, athletics is the most external part of our university, like many universities. And you can either, you know, fight that or you can embrace it. And really, you think about Marquette University, athletics, particularly men's basketball, is something that we're known for across the country. When I travel around the country, the one reason why they know Marquette is going all the way back to Al McGuire in the years and the success we've had since then. And so,
and the kind of odd uniforms that they had for a year.
That's right.
Some of you remember
them.
the Marquette
Yeah.
uniforms?
Yeah. If you've
Curious.
Yes. So the reality is that, you know, we want to embrace, you know, that part of our university. It's the way that we build pride within our student base, you know, our student body. You know, it's a way that they really, you know, grow in their respect and their appreciation of the university during their time on their campus. And then you see our alumni, how many people travel and are passionate, you know, about, you know, our university. As Father said, it is something that, you know, it really builds, you know, great pride in the university. And also, and it's also true that whether it be our men's basketball program or other programs, you know, our student athletes are ambassadors for our university. They're out representing us, you know, almost every week, you know, at different parts of the country. And again, it's something that we really need to invest in and ensure that, you know, we're putting our best foot forward, because if that's what they know us for and about, you know, we should really ensure that we're doing it well. And it's not just doing well, you know, on the field, but it's also doing well in the classroom, doing well in the community. And we actually did a study, we had a sports economist look at our investment into our men's basketball program. And the report came back that we get a 6-to-1 return on every dollar we invest in our men's basketball program. I'm not sure there's no other part
Were you
of the university.
surprised by that?
I was surprised maybe by the number. It was bigger than I expected, but again, I'm not sure there's another part of the university we invest in we get a 6-to-1 return on. And so, obviously, it's something that not only, you know, for building the community and the pride in the institution, it's also financially it probably makes some sense as well.
Let me talk to you both about the evolution of sports programs and what we see oftentimes in terms of public perceptions and even questioning. We talk about value of sports as part of the university mission and the university community. And Father, you first. Villanova has always had a marvelous basketball tradition. But in the last decade or so, it has been astonishing. A couple of years ago, national championship, you know, highly rated team this year. I understand that after the national championship, there was a dramatic spike in application. Maybe dramatic is not word, but
it was dramatic.
All right, dramatic. Applications, quality of applicants. It mirrors what many people refer to as the Flutie effect. When Doug Flutie and the elevation of Boston College. As a president, how do you respond? And I don't know if people have said this to you, but I suspect there are people out there saying, wait a minute, this is Villanova. Are we becoming a factory? Are we becoming a basketball factory? And as a consequence of that, our Faustian bargain is we're going to sell our academic and moral soul to be successful as a basketball team. How do you answer that?
Yes. No, I think that it's really important, the culture that we create around it. And our coach, Jay Wright, does a terrific job of creating that culture. Our men's team, they need to, when they come there, when they're recruited to come to Villanova, there is a buy-in that they have to come into. You know, we push academics. You know, they all graduate. We're not looking for young men that are one and done. We're looking for people that really are going to be invested in what Jay refers to all the time as Villanova basketball. That there's this sense of team, and there's a sense of, he says all the time, you know, you're playing for the name on the front of the shirt, not the name on the back of the shirt, you know, and you're part of the team. So there's this energy that's centered around the team, and he really does nurture that in a very real way. And it's affected across the campus. The students know it, our alumni know it, they see it. I mean, for Villanova, that moment at the end of the NCAA tournament was probably the best thing that I saw happen. I mean, I love the fact that, you know, Daniel was mopping the floor himself, you know, Ryan passed the ball to Chris, you know, and Ryan was the senior, you know, it was Ryan's shot, you know, but he had the better deal. So, and the way they talk, the way they converse with each other. So I don't think that Villanova, even as well as he's done and the kinds of program that he's developed there, there's also developing the young man as part of the Villanova community and what that means. And they are encouraged to be regular students. They are encouraged to get involved in other things. So they're not this kind of elite group of players on campus. They're not viewed by the students as kings or anything like that. They're average, ordinary students. And he really works to make them that way. So I'm not fearful that it's...
Let me ask you the same question about Marquette. I think it's fair to say, basketball-wise, trying to resurrect the glories of a program that has had a great tradition over the years. You have a young coach, comes from a high-profile program from Duke, was a great player himself. New building, new facility coming up. And again, I suspect there's some folks out there that might say, why is Marquette doing that? Why do we need a new building? You know, why do we need to bring in, you know, this notion of resurrection? And aren't we also, by doing that? And people often say, especially when you're trying to build as opposed to maintain, you know, maybe you're investing too much time, energy, resources. What's the answer to that from Marquette's perspective?
Well, obviously, resources are very valuable on college campuses, and you're always going to have tensions, whatever program you're investing in. And one of the things that, you know, I'm very proud of in our campus, and you heard Father Peter allude to it, is we're not some program on the hill. You know, all of athletics, particularly men's basketball, are very much integrated, you know, within the fabric of the campus. You know, and I'm very proud of the fact that Steve Wojciechowski, he goes to the Dean's Council meetings, he goes and guest lectures in the classrooms, Carolyn Keeger, our women's coach as well. They really want, you know, to be part of our university in a way that people relate to them. And our men's basketball players are the same way. They want to be looked at as just other students in the classroom, with the other students and experiencing things in that way. And so when you think about, you know, the return we get, you know, from our investment in athletics and the fact that they are integrated directly within the other student body or the other leadership on the campus, there's not much animosity when you know somebody, rather than some program that they're isolating themselves and not interacting with the rest of the campus.
And one of the I think troubling elements has been sort of self-segregation, that you see both my children were Division I athletes, and you know, I wouldn't let them live off campus. You're staying on campus and you're going to room with people who are not athletes, who have different, you know, majors. To encourage the notion of what you're saying is you have to be part of the fabric of the community. You can be an interesting part of the fabric, but part of the fabric. Father, let me ask you, and I'm going to get in a minute to some of the bigger issues we're seeing, but I'm curious, and Val has talked about, you know, the growth of the Big East. You were literally in the room when this is being created or recreated, however you want to talk about it. Go back to then and look forward to today. Did you expect it to become what it's become so quickly?
I think we hoped it would. I think we were confident that it could.
You know what I love about priests? You get honest answers. I'm so used to interviewing politicians and Hollywood people where you have no idea what the answer is going to be. And this is coming from a former altar boy, so I can say to him. But it's nice when you get honest answers.
No, we really, I mean, it was a risk. We realized it was a risk. You know, the 7 schools that kind of took the Big East name and kept the conference, and there was an energy that we felt we had with basketball. And when we sat with the other the former members of the Big East, there was a lot of deflections going on. People were moving to other conferences. There was a lot happening at the time of people jumping ship and going someplace else and looking for greater glory, and most of those glories centered around football, building their football programs. None of us had football. Villanova has a football team. Georgetown has a football team, but we don't play in the FBS division. And it has never been the prominent sport for us in terms of, you know, the way it is at some other big schools. We didn't have the money to invest in it. We don't have, you know, the size of the stadium you need and all of those things that go with it. But I think the 7 schools really felt that what we had and what we started out as the Big East was a basketball-centric conference, and it had always been that, even when other schools with football teams were part of it. Basketball was kind of one of their shining stars, you know, so that was really how it started, and we thought we need to take it back, and we need to focus on what we do well and not be in, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but I think we were feeling very much like we were second-class citizens in this conference, because you would go to presidents' meetings and the conversation for most of the meeting was football and what was happening with the football programs. And I think the 7 of us, and we happened to all be Catholic at the time, we needed to make a move in order for our own survival. And so it was a big risk to take it. I think it's done more than what we anticipated in a very short amount of time. We invited some good partners to join us to create the 10 teams. And you know, we've put a lot of work and energy into it, and the conference staff certainly has done a great job of marketing us. And every team has gotten better. Every team has gotten better. So I think we've put our stamp on we are a basketball conference.
Let me shift our focus a little bit to some prevailing issues. And Val sort of alluded to what's been going on out in the basketball world in the last couple of months. So my question to both of you is this, and Dr. Love, I'll start with you. There is an expression you often hear in the world of politics that the perception very quickly becomes the reality. And in the basketball world now, with all of this reporting, even though, you know, as a journalist, and as a former prosecutor and former defense attorney, I'm very quick to say, look, we don't know the facts yet. We think we know some of them, but there's a lot more to be learned. But some of what has been suggested sounds like a fairly severe indictment of some elements of the world of college basketball. So my question to you is this. Again, I'm sure there are people out there thinking, okay, everybody does this. I don't care who you are, everybody to some extent is dirty. And money's changing hands, and even if the presidents don't know, and the athletic directors don't know, even if the head coaches don't know, it's out there, and everybody's doing it, because we've heard people say that. How do you then both, as presidents of institutions where basketball is a significant aspect of your community and has had great success, how do you respond to that, to people who are saying, you know, everybody's involved?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is not uncommon in the world of sports. We take a few fairly isolated incidents, and particularly, you know, some that can be very negative, and paint with a very broad brush that the entire, you know, sports programs, you know, are represented the same way. And, you know, I can just say that, you know, we're a values-based institution, and I'm very, you know, confident in, you know, one thing I love about Marquette is there's complete alignment between myself, the athletic director, Bill Scholl, Chief Wojciechowski, our basketball coach, on the ways we want to represent and conduct, you know, ourselves. And I can just tell you, there is no doubt in my mind that those things are not happening on my campus and with my men's basketball team. And I'm sure Father Peter could say the same thing. And unfortunately, there were a few incidents out there that, are very troubling for all of us. It taints the whole brand, of men's basketball. And, hopefully, when at the end of the day, it'll be shown to not be that prevalent, within men's basketball, within NCAA, just be some instance. And like other times in the past when things have happened, they'll clean these parts up and we'll move on. And unfortunately, it's just human nature sometimes to try to take an easier path. And some individuals, tend to do that. But I will just tell you that I think predominantly, with, the hundreds and thousands of student athletes that we have on our college campus today, it's a very few of them that actually take part in these things.
How do you get, Father Peter, I'll ask you this, how do you get then the public to get that message? Look, part of the problem with my business in journalism, you often hear the expression, especially with local news, it says if it bleeds, it leads, which means obviously you turn on your local news, the first story you're going to see is about a fire and then a murder and something else. Maybe in the end they'll do what they call a kicker, a nice story, about something sort of uplifting. And look, investigative journalism is essential. And it does marvelous things. But you don't hear as much of the good stories, and the graduation rate being what people don't realize. The Division I graduation rate is 86%. In your conference, it's even higher than that, and significantly higher. And if you ask somebody in the audience, I do this often on speeches, I'll say, what do you think graduation rate is, Division I athletes? And they'll say, yeah, 30%, maybe 40%. And when I say 86%, they're astonished. And when you compare that to the 65% graduation rate for students who are not athletes, it's truly remarkable. But it proves my point. People don't know. And people are going to walk away from whatever comes from this, saying again, all right, well, sure, some schools are fine, but everybody's dirty in some fashion. So how do we get the message of Villanova and Marquette and the rest of the Big East schools, and as you said, the vast majority of student athletes, how do we get the positive message out there to them?
Well, I think the news media has some part to play in that. What kind of stories are you telling? Because you can create all kinds of stories. And the universities and colleges can create all kinds of stories too. So it's what kind of message do you put forward about who you are and the kind of schools you are and the kind of athletes that you have. There's always going to be people that choose to do something that is going to benefit them and not necessarily benefit the common good. So they will make choices. And, our schools can have that. I say all the time that, we could have a men's basketball player do something that any other student on campus would do. But that will be the person in the news. I mean, they won't care that, some accounting major did the same thing. But, let Jalen Brunson do something. It's the front page of the paper, So there's this kind of hunger for that kind of sensationalism and that kind of story. It's the sexy part of it, this is interesting. They don't want to hear about good men and women who are doing good things and making good choices, and that's what people eat up. So you have to keep telling that message in one way or another, and keep hitting home that this is what we do well, and this is the kind of women and men we create at our institutions, and that's all you can do.
I've often suggested to athletic directors and marketing folks, saying, it's hard to get those stories out. But, put it on your website. So where you don't have to click through to find it. Have it on the opening page of your website where you have, once a week your great student athletes and what they've done and what they've accomplished in the community. And, so people immediately, when they go to Villanova Athletics, bang, there's somebody. Marquette Athletics, bang, there's somebody. But as you said, it's right. You're right. It's a difficult and a bit of an uphill battle to get the media to tell positive stories. It's the whole notion of what sells newspapers, if anybody still reads newspapers out there. Let me ask you another thing, and it ties into this a little bit. There is there's sort of become a popular brand of question that is posed to leaders in all realms. And even though it's sort of become popular, I think it's still a pretty powerful question to ask. And that is, essentially, what is it that keeps you up at night? What is the thing that, you don't want to hear about in the middle of the night or when you wake up in the morning or as you're pondering yourself as you're trying to drift off to sleep? What is it that kind of grabs you and puzzles you and troubles you at the same time? Why don't you start?
Well, I'll start with last night. And it was Villanova shooting 67% in the second half and having all their starters hit 3-pointers. I tried to sleep last night. That was what kept me up. But I think
That didn't keep me up.
no, I'm sure it didn't. I'm sure it didn't, Father. The challenge we face in higher education, and some of it's come up, with athletics, but in general, there's a perception today that higher ed may not be worth it anymore, and you can look at national publications that question whether student debt and whether preparing students for the jobs of the future are out there. And so the first time we are really kind of fighting an uphill battle, whether higher ed is worth it today, and those forces manifest themselves in many different ways, and we're becoming, the competition for students on our campuses is becoming greater than ever before. Students are making decisions on where to go for as little as $500 a year. And so, those tensions, make you really worry about, how can you ensure that we're staying relevant as technology is changing the world. It's also changing higher education. And the way we prepare our students, the way we teach them, the way we get them ready for the jobs of the future, we're going through a really significant time of change within higher education. And so, as a president, we want to ensure that we're going to make sure the institution's going to be around not just 5 years, but 10 years from 20 years from now from the decisions we're making now. Because, essentially, if you're not changing, you're becoming irrelevant.
Father, how about you?
It's the question that's always asked, what keeps you up at night? I would agree with what Mike just said, but my biggest concern is the safety of our community. It is, any college or university is and should be an open space. People are invited in there to engage in discussions and dialogues, and to be people that can find a place to voice their concerns and voice their opinions about things. But college campuses are also a petri dish for a lot of things. And young people, 18 to 22-year-olds, think they're immortal. And that it's kind of, there's a time that they test and they're challenging themselves and challenging each other, and it's that phone call in the middle of the night that something's happened or somebody's gotten hurt or something's occurred on campus that is devastating to a college campus. The death of a student, it's remarkable how it affects the campus for months to come. And so those are the kinds of things that worry me and concern me, and the cost and all of the things that are involved in it. You want to create an environment that does what higher education should be doing. It should be a place where people come to learn, but it also should be a place where new discoveries are made and knowledge is furthered. And how do you continue to do that and to create a safe environment that also opens up all of those doors to allow that investigation and inquiry to take place?
We have a few minutes left, I think. Let me ask you to be in a position to affect change. Now, as you know, in a university environment, we talk about shared governance. It is not an autocracy. It's not a situation where you as the CEO could say, all right, as of tomorrow, for the most part, as of tomorrow, we have some new significant rules here. We look at the Ncaa and we understand how it works, and sadly a lot of folks don't. Sadly, a lot of folks think the Ncaa can just somehow proclaim that this is different. And as we know, 1,100 member institutions, 3 different divisions. Rules are made by the leaders of the institutions. So it's a fairly cumbersome process. I mean, that's not a bad idea. But things don't change very quickly and not unilaterally. If, hypothetically, I could put each of you in a situation where you had that power to effect a change or an improvement in what we're seeing in terms of the college athletics landscape and the student athletes who populate that and the leaders of that. If you could say one thing that if I had the power to change or improve, to make this experience better for everybody, this is what I would do, Father, what would you do?
Specifically in terms of athletics.
Well, athletics and the university.
Oh, the university. There's a lot of things I'd do for the university. But in the world of athletics, if I had the magic wand and I could say this is the way it is, I think that it would be that colleges and universities keep focus on the fact that these are young men and women who have other lives. They're not professional athletes. Many of them would like to be, but many of them will never be, and they know it. And there's lots of sports on campus that those people will never have an opportunity to go professional, but they enjoy playing that sport. That it's an opportunity to help them grow physically and mentally and spiritually. That it's a place for them to really kind of gain a better awareness of who they are. And I think that to really focus athletics as part of the university, not the be-all and end-all of the university, but that it's a part of it. It's a part of who we are, and that they're exploring who they are in many facets. And they are not professional. They are not professional athletes, and they are students, first and foremost. They are students, and they happen to be athletes as well. And I think sometimes that message gets really garbled in higher education. That it's how much money can be made, how much this, how much that, how many people can you bring in, and how big can your facilities be, and so that you get caught up in that game.
How about you? I'll give you the last word here.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously the place to focus is on the student athlete, and one thing again we're very proud of is that 2/3 of our 300 student athletes are on the Big East Academic Honor Roll, and so obviously they're students first and athletes second. As Father said, a handful of our student athletes will ever play professionally, and so I'm always thinking about how we can enhance the experience of those student athletes, because again, they are being asked to represent us as a university. The time constraints on student athletes today are just remarkable, and when I meet with student athletes and talk to them about what they would like more of, and they'd like to be more part of the general experience that our students get on our campus. They don't necessarily have the time to do the types of things that many of our students have on our campus. So if there's a way, and I know we've already made some strides of giving them more time during the week by giving them day off and other things, that's really, I want to think about how we can ensure that they can have a similar experience to our general students, even though they have this extra time constraint on them of being student athletes. And I'm always amazed about what they are able to accomplish with all the other things they have compared to a general student.
An illustration, my daughter was a lacrosse player at Yale. She's now a cancer surgeon at the University of Pennsylvania Hospital. And she ended up missing her senior year because she tore up her shoulder and had to have surgery. And she would marvel. And she said, look, I miss my game and my teammates and playing. I miss it terribly. But this was kind of interesting. To take courses at a time in the afternoon. She became a tour guide for the British Art Museum. She took naps in the afternoon. Yeah. And as I said, our student athletes love what they're doing, and they want to get better. They want to win games. But I think it's important, as you said, from my perspective, having been a student athlete and the father of two student athletes, to create some opportunity for them to really experience what everybody else does at college. Well, there's a whole lot we could talk about, and perhaps we will in another venue another time. But I hope you found this illuminating and provocative, and certainly we want to thank both Father Peter and also Mike for their time, and most importantly for their thoughts and comments. So thank you to both of you for doing that.
Okay. Before we get to our next panel, just a couple of key notes here. Today's event, the Big East Roundtable, is being streamed live on Fox Sports Go. Just so, in case you're wondering what the camera is in the back of the room. For the next two panels, at the end, if we have time, we'll allow for some questions from some of you. So if you hear something, want to know something, feel free to voice that. Also a reminder tonight, semifinals, 6:30 game tonight, Xavier against Providence College. Villanova has the second game against Butler starting at 9 p.m. While we change over here, I just wanted to cite a couple things and something that Father Peter said that really struck me, and that is, you know, as part of his mission at an institution, and it mirrors our mission as a Big East Conference, sometimes we forget that, and this is part of the transition, okay, so no worries. You know, there's sometimes we forget that we're really dealing with young people's lives. And the second panel, I think, is very appropriate. And when we're dealing with their lives, Father Peter said they try to shape young people spiritually, physically, and educationally. And I think that's important. It's important for our conference that we do that, but we're really assisted before they get to our institutions by the people some of the people that you'll see on our next panel. And that's what I'm really excited about, because this is truly the process in terms of how young people's lives are shaped for the future, and it really starts at a much younger age before the Big East Conference gets them. So I'm going to bring up Dave Popkin, if he's ready, and he'll lead into our second panel. Dave Popkin.
Stu, thanks so much, and we appreciate everybody joining us here in New York and around the world, online on the Big East Digital Network, Fox Sports Go. Obviously a big night for the Big East coming up with the semifinals of the men's basketball tournament. We had a couple of great games yesterday with Providence and Creighton going to overtime, Seton Hall and Butler, a one-point game. It's been a terrific tournament so far, and we are going to talk about how these student athletes get there, onto that stage, how they're developed, who's in contact with them, and who influences them before they make it into a Seton Hall uniform, as one of the parents on the panel has a current Seton Hall player. So without further ado, thanks for joining us, and we'll get things started. To my right is Savina Kale. She is an elementary school principal in Newark, Delaware, and the mother of Miles Kale, a star freshman guard for Seton Hall. We also have Boo Williams, who is a high school and college star, over 1,500 points at St. Joseph's. He's in the St. Joe's Hall of Fame, in the Big Five Hall of Fame. He's been a youth coach for over 35 years. He is the chairman of the National Boys and Girls AAU, and he has mentored over 700 Division I scholarship athletes, boys and girls, that have come through his summer program in Virginia over the years. So he has a unique perspective. He's also won the Human Spirit Community Service Award from the Basketball Hall of Fame. And then we also have Krishna Vada here. Chris was an AAU coach and a skills trainer. He's the principal and head coach of the Patrick School, formerly St. Patrick, in Hillside, New Jersey. And he too has had dozens of Division I players. Kyrie Irving, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, Al Harrington, Shaheen Holloway, Angel Delgado, and many others, and current players on his team that are being recruited by Division I schools. So let's jump right into it. I'd like to start with you, Mrs. Kale. What was the recruiting process like for your family in terms of the volume of mails, call, texts from head coaches, assistant coaches, etc.? What was that process like, and how long did that go on for you?
In one word, overwhelming. In one word. It was a process that we took with a grain of salt. We tried to make sure that our son stayed level-headed and focused. We wanted to make sure that he kept his grades up and didn't get too overwhelmed with the coaches coming to the gym all the time, the conversations, the text messages, the mail, like you said. We wanted to really make sure that he stayed, like I said, even, and didn't get too, you know, over excited about the whole thing. We didn't want him to become someone with a big head and get too involved in all that. We wanted to keep him level-headed.
What would you change about it? Would you put limits on it?
what we actually did, we did a good job of making sure that, I mean, he got text messages and phone calls, but we made sure that they, you know, they weren't too late, and we got involved with the conversations with coaches too. So they were respectful for the most part. We didn't have a hard time getting people to understand, you know, where we were coming from.
Chris, I'd like to talk to you about this process as well, and how much you shepherd that at the Patrick School. Do you act as a general clearinghouse? Do coaches generally go right to the athlete? Do they go right to the parent? How does that work?
Well, before they get to high school, you know, the process starts very early in AAU. So by the time they get to us, a lot of that process has already begun. And my advice when they first get in is to set guidelines. So for example, maybe certain days of the week that coaches are allowed to call, certain times of the day they're allowed to call. As a principal, you know, one of the problems we have to deal with daily is cell phones. And you would have coaches that text me, and I'm like, if they're texting me during my work day, I can just imagine what's going on with the students. So, you know, we have to put guidelines on that as well. But my advice to the parents is take control of it, because if you don't, it will absolutely ruin the process for you.
And Boo, what do you think the percentage is of influence, AAU coach versus a high school coach? The AAU coach can technically spend an unlimited amount of time with these kids, and do they, you know, do they spend an overwhelming amount of time, and do they have an overwhelming amount of influence on their decision to where they go to college?
It's a complicated issue. Most of these AAU coaches, and sometimes people forget, everybody not AAU coaches. Some of these are coaches, and they got no parts of the AAU. Some of these coaches in my program been since the kid in the 3rd grade. So even before they even get to high school. So I mean, this is a very complicated issue, and it can't be solved by one question. Because if you've been with a kid that don't have a mother or father, and you are now their surrogate mother and father as a 3rd or 4th grader, that kid grows up as that person. So they're going to have some kind of influence in that. Especially today's world, there's so much money involved. College coaches make so much money. Shoe money, so much money involved, that now these guys, I'm totally against the one and done. Because the problem with the one and done is, kids is the thing about getting out of school before they get in school. See, right now we got 14 players in the NBA and 8 in the WNBA. We got to think kids as a 5th and 6th grade think about how I'm going to get out of school, and education is so important because, as you know, less than 1% of people play basketball for a living. The other 99% get a job. And see, people lose track of that. So the influence, that's why I'm saying, the problem I have with one and done, I'll get that out of the way in my circuit. One and done, people gather so much information on one done. The relationship now have become, now they treat this like the new drug game. They get a 6-7 kid, they take that kid all the way through high school, and then the kid only going to play 1 year of college. Most of the kids finish, you know, the kid going away because after January, the kid is through school. He don't even go to class 2nd semester. And the university let the kid play but not going to class. So, I mean, it's a complicated issue.
It's ridiculous, and it's also a very small percentage of players that can do that and go one and done. You might be talking about 20 or 30 players, you know, of the hundreds, but for them, it is a sham. I agree. Let's talk about the difference between youth, like travel basketball, and AAU, because you have a governing body of which you are in charge that has some restrictions on who can see the kids and, you know, time of tournaments and things like that versus just the wild world of travel basketball. What's the difference, and how much of each is there out there?
See, people get confused. We got a governing body, we got to answer to a committee, and we can be as cumbersome as the NCAA. But the problem is, a lot of times it's non-AAU sports, and they call us AAU. We got a bad public perception. People take the AAU and hijack our name. People know 90% of the basketball outside of high school basketball is not AAU. They're not sanctioned by the AAU, but the paper call it AAU, and then we get a bad name from AAU. So that's one problem we have, and it's a perception problem.
Mrs. Kale, Miles played for the South Jersey Jazz, played for Tim Legler, who is an NBA star, ESPN announcer, and he loves coaching as well. What was that experience like And subsequently, how important was it in making him a Division I player? If he just played high school basketball and not AAU, and I'm assuming this was an AAU team?
Yes.
How much of a difference did that make for him?
It made a great impact. Actually, working through Tim Legler, who has been a great mentor for Miles, was a great experience. He actually gave us a lot of information that I don't think otherwise we would have gotten. Allowed us to sort of understand the rules, the expectations, talk to Miles on a one-on-one about, again, grades and doing the right thing and making sure he understood that he represents just more than himself. So I think that experience, just working with someone like Tim Legler, was wonderful. But I do know there are some programs that are not. And you know, you have to really do your homework. You really have to understand that exactly what he said. All teams are not AAU, and all coaches are not looking out for your behalf, or your son's behalf, or your child's behalf. So you have to really be careful.
Let's talk about skill development a little bit. Obviously, you know, Tim is a very skilled player and passes that on to his players. Chris, you worked in skill development and still do, obviously, as a head coach, but did it professionally as well. How much of that goes on? Like, are these players working 12 months a year? Like, are they going after school, before school, every day because they want that scholarship?
Yes, it's a big part. It's a part that we as coaches have to embrace. You talk about the changing of basketball and the sport itself over the years. Each year it has changed. And for us now, we have a middle school that we're probably going to be turning into an academy next year because of the demand. So one of the big things across the country now is students reclassing in middle school. So we've had a number of kids, especially last year, come off a championship year. Our enrollment practically doubled in 1 year. And as a result of that, we now have to make accommodations for those things that parents are looking for. And one of which is our middle schoolers were able to start school earlier now, and they do skill development in the mornings, and they go to classes after that and have lunch and classes again, and they'll have individual instructions again. So that's a huge part. In most parents that we deal with, that's probably the biggest component of it all. Most parents now feel that they could supplement the academic components at another time or in some other way, but that is their number one priority because, again, whether it's true or not, everyone from grade 3 on up now believes that their goal, their main objective is to get to the NBA, and we know the reality of the path to get there, but that doesn't matter. Every parent and every student athlete that comes through believe that that's what their number one priority is.
Now, Savina, your son almost played for Chris, almost left his home high school to come up to northern New Jersey, and I guess to live there potentially during his senior year to help recruiting, I guess, and to help skill development. What went into the decision, first of all, to commit to the Patrick School, and then to change your mind and say, no, that doesn't make sense for us. We want to keep him home for the last year? Like, what was that decision-making process like for you?
Initially, it was all about experience. The Patrick School has a wonderful history of basketball experience and just the caliber of play, the competition. And so we wanted him to be exposed to that to sort of get him ready for college basketball. Being from a small town, Middletown, Delaware, doesn't get a hold of that that high caliber of competition. So we wanted to make sure that he was ready for the college level. But then after him, committing to Seton Hall, as a family, we just thought about it and said, is it really necessary? Is it, he really got to the point where it's like, you know what, this is my senior year. I want to graduate with my friends and family. And we talked and discussed it for a long time. But we finally let him decide. I'm like, you're becoming an adult. You got to make these decisions on your own. And so we let him decide, and he really wanted to stay home and graduate with his friends and enjoy that senior year.
Jack spoke earlier in the first panel about the FBI investigation, about the subsequent report in Yahoo. Boo, I'll start with you. How pervasive are agents? How young does it start? And do you think it's more the exception or the rule?
It's more, I'm telling you what, more the exception than the rule. I think people get carried away here. we're only talking about 1% of the basketball population. And then 99%, then in the paper it seemed like 99% of the problem. Because there's not that many guys in the NBA. NBA got 450 spots. And most of them guys, like ask Vince Carter, he didn't look like he'd leave anytime soon. So it's hard to get jobs out here. Now you add the European market in it, it's even harder to get jobs out here. So a kid got a better chance jumping off the moon and landing in Hampton than get a chance to play in the NBA. It's just not many jobs. And then when you get in the NBA, that circle is crazy. Are you a player? Are you a rotation player? Are you a G League player? So I see what Adam's going to do with the NBA, I see USA Basketball. This is a very complicated issue because like you're only dealing with less than 1% of the population.
And yet, your players, Chris, for example, how many of them think they're going to the NBA?
I would say 20 years ago, I once made the statement in practice that you're not going to the NBA, and the student said to me, you don't know that. So after that point, I never ever make that a debate in practice anymore. That's what their goals are, and I just go with it and let that take its course itself. But I don't get into a discussion with kids about you can't make it or this. You can tell them about how difficult the path is to get there and what they need to do to get there. But as far as telling them that they're not going to make it, I've never ever made that mistake again.
But they think they can make it.
Absolutely, every one of them, from the middle school right through to the high school. Like Boo said, it is less than 1% or 1% that do actually make it. We've been blessed that we've had a number of players that make it, and we have the possibility of having a couple more in next year, getting in. However, it is, even though it's a small percentage, we have to manage that very carefully because I've been around our school for a number of 20 some odd years now, and we've had student athletes being followed into the bathroom, into the stalls. They come out, there's messages, there's things in there for them. So everywhere we go, there's always something there. We were in a national tournament 2 years ago, and every walk, every turn, had agents or this person coming at me. So it's something we have to deal with. Again, not every one of our athletes have to experience that, but if it's one too many. And unfortunately, there is, the bitter side that we have to make sure we have things in place to monitor that, to make sure it doesn't get to the point where it's going to be a very turbulent situation for the student and the school.
Boo, there are a lot of companies out there that sponsor AAU teams, travel teams as well, providing benefits to these student athletes while they're in high school. It then becomes an NCAA violation if that goes over the line, right? If there are impermissible benefits. What is the line, and are people always trying to push past that line?
I know that people are going to try to push past the line. Because like I said before, there's so much money involved in this thing. You see what the college coach is making. You see what the shoe company is making. Now, a guy, when working with kids, say, since he's 34th grade, if S college can make this kind of money, I'm benefit the college coach, I get nothing out of it. So now I need to get something out of it. I mean, it's a shell game that gets very complicated. Because when I first started this, everybody had jobs. Now this is their job. That's a change. Mm-hmm. Everybody, when I first started, everybody went to work every day, 9 to 5, everything. Now you got young folks now think, if I get a player here, I can create this player at the next Kyrie Irving or Allen Iverson, and this is my job. And then I become the handler, the agent, and all that stuff. So that has changed immensely. Because when I first started, you did this for fun. Now the people have turned this to a job. Because they see in the paper, like USA Today had all the amateurs, all the college coaches, how much they make. If a guy said, I've been working with Allen Iverson since 3rd grade, I should be the one to make that kind of money. I'm the one developing him. You didn't develop him. He not even going to stay in college long enough for you to develop him. So that's how you got to be very careful how this whole thing aspect, because it's a very complicated issue.
Chris, you collapsed on a plane 4 years ago because of your lifestyle as a coach and your health in general. Did that change your perspective on what you do on a day-to-day basis, on the way that you do it at your school with your players?
Absolutely. I've personally, I used to live and breathe it. Even with the school, live and breathe. I work late hours there. If it was basketball, late hours there. Now, the good thing is that there are a lot of trainers out there, so they take away a lot of that time that we used to put into developing the students. A lot of that now, players are finishing an open gym, they're heading off to a trainer. You know, so a lot of that work, that body work that we did in the past, we don't longer have to do. And now there's fall leagues, there's summer leagues, there's leagues every time of the year. So again, it gives us an opportunity not to just be observer, really appreciate the kids as people, as student athletes, and as a player, and see them in a different light that we normally don't get to because we're not always in that competitive mode. So for me, it's been a blessing, you know, having those other entities involved in the students, in our student athletes' lives.
I'd like to change the topic a little bit to the everyday life for the student athlete. And Mrs. Kale, I've traveled with Seton Hall for 15 years. It's become increasingly difficult as the league has gotten you know, more far-flung geographically. They're spending, you know, days on end on trips during the semester, yet obviously beneficial to them. So how does Miles do it? Like, I really don't understand how the student athletes are able to manage the academics and the athletics and the travel and being good ambassadors for the university and having a normal college life. Like, how does he break up his time? And I'm asking too many questions, but how hard has it been his freshman year to juggle that?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, because I'm always on him about his grades. Like, did you study today? And at one point, I was sending him a schedule. You need to make sure that you 2 hours of studying, 2 hours. I mean, you have to be involved with that because it's a lot. It's a lot. You know, when they have individuals, they have training, then they have regular practice, and they have film. It's a lot in a day coming from high school. It's a huge transition, and just not being able to that and understanding that, man, I don't even have any time for me. So it was difficult. That first semester was difficult. And he and I talked about it with my husband, and we told him, you need to organize your time. Even write down, and I said, use your phone, put down time for a nap. You have to put down everything. And I think that helped him go from that first semester to the second semester, just putting down everything, and in order for him to sort of organize things and understand, you know, even, you know, put down time when you want to hang out with your friends, when you want to play the Xbox games or whatever you want to do. You need to schedule everything.
Chris, how much time goes into preparing your student athletes academically for the jump from high school to college? Because the Big East schools are elite academic institutions. You know, you have Angel Delgado goes from the Dominican Republic, where he doesn't speak a lot of English. He goes to Elizabeth, New Jersey, and he plays for you, and then he has to go compete academically with all these other students at Seton Hall. How much attention can you and do you give someone like that so that he's ready?
Well, I'm a little bit more fortunate than most coaches are because as the president / principal of the school, I get to set our schedule. And one of the things that a quote that I heard many years ago at Seton Hall University, one of their academic advisors at the time, I'm not sure if she's still there, Robin Cunningham, said, she was speaking, I think it was a camp or something, and she said, make sure we pay attention to the kids' time, you know, and I took that and I've always lived by it every single day. So I'm very, very mindful of their time. They get almost total say-so on when we have practice and what we do and how we do it. I do force on them team activities. So whether it's bowling, whether it's just non-basketball stuff, trips or whatever, dining together, you know, every single day, you know, we have at least one meal together, minimum, usually it's probably two. So those things, I make sure that they have times outside of basketball, which is very, very important to me. And in our school, you know, I heard the President of Villanova talk about everyone's the same. In our school, it's the same. No one cares if you're 6'10", if you're All-American, etc. You're just another person. And we try to make sure that everyone lives that way. And that's really important to me, to make sure that they do have time for that. Again, as a principal now, I also have access to their grades. I see what their grades are coming in. I know what they need going out. No parent can ask me, how's my child? And I can answer them, I don't know. I'll have to check and get back to you. I know right away. And I'm a stickler for a lot of things on and off the court, in particular academics. So in our place, it's they have no choice. You know, there is no choice to not succeed, or you're not going to be there. And I'm one of the few coaches out there that'll probably, you're not going to play, you know, if you're not adhering to whether it's rules or your academic commitments. Those things come first. And they're all in line with us. If you're not going to do that, and you're not going to go to class or be on time, whatever, the same thing will translate onto the basketball court. and I have zero tolerance for that. So for me, it's very different again because I control those entities that other schools, other coaches don't have the ability to.
Boo, give us some historical perspective on high school and college basketball, AAU basketball. People are saying that some of the things that came out of the news a couple weeks ago have been happening for 50 years, 70 years. Like it's always happened, and it just happened to be a report that exposed some alleged things. When you started with AAU after you finished playing overseas, 1982, is that right?
1982.
1982.
I had less gray hair.
As did I. What has changed, and how much has it changed at all since then, or is it pretty similar?
There's a lot of changes. I don't think the kids have changed. Back when I had Alonzo, I don't think the kids has changed. I think who's changed? The parents. The parents are off the chart. The parents have become the new agent. The parents are off the chart. Another day, Sunday morning, I'm going to go to church. I got to go to my sports place, and there were 10-year-old parents fighting each other at a basketball game. That's the biggest change, the parents.
That never happens.
And then the second biggest change, social media. God almighty, we ain't had no social media. I'm still using a flip phone. I'm still in the old days. So social media changed. Now, everybody, how did people respond? And the third thing, everybody wants things right now. They can't wait for it. Nobody got patience. Everything we want right now. I won't be able to play right now. I want to do this right now. I think we got to get back to life skills. I think that's one of life skills. Teaching kids how to be able to spend time in their homework, spend time in other things, and do other things in life other than play basketball. But it's hard to do that. I'm telling you, the money is so big. Kids look at the money, or there's somebody who look at the money for them. And the problem is, a lot of guys making it in the NBA, then they don't have the money after they finish because they spent the money. Mm-hmm. They misuse the money. See, I think we got to educate, do it more educated. So if the kid can't do it, play in the NBA, he can finish college basketball, get a job. That's the real world. I think we got to put life skills. I think it's a misconception. Like the NCAA got a big book this big on rules and regulation. They only pertain to about 25 kids. Other kids just glad to be in school. Mm-hmm. Get a scholarship. So I think we do too much for so little.
Mrs. Kale, is it worth it? The practices, the 7 days a week, the summers, the recruiting phone calls, all of this stuff, and then your son gets to play at Madison Square Garden on national TV last night in an exciting game. He played well. He had 9 points. He's doing great for the team. Is all the sacrifice worth it?
It's worth it. He's happy, and that's my biggest thing. I want to make sure that he's happy. He's happy with his decision at Seton Hall. He loves the players. He loves the coaching staff, the school. So he's very, very happy. My husband and I thought of all of this as an investment. Our bottom line, we wanted not to have to pay for college. We're not thinking that, okay, he's going to be a professional player. If it works out that way, wonderful. But we wanted him to be able to go to college and for us not to have to pay for it. Mm. So that was the bottom line for us, and to make sure that he went somewhere where he felt comfortable and he's happy. Yeah.
The other parents that you've seen, that you come in contact with through high school, through AAU, have they been offered things? And would you blame them if they took things if their family needed it? That seems to be out there, in that somebody gets a loan because the family needs it, and because all of a sudden, this young man is going to be the breadwinner for the family when he's 17 years old. Did you see a lot of that?
No, to be honest, I did not see a lot of that. But it's giving that opportunity, that decision. That's a hard decision to make, and I think that some of the rules need to change. I believe that the league need to take a long and hard look at trying to figure out a way where players can be compensated in some type of way. And I understand that it's a big thing because you have a lot of athletes.
They get the
some
stipend,
schools,
they get a couple
they get
$1,000,
right.
and scholarship.
We're talking about
But-
millions and billions of dollars
understand.
being made.
Yep.
And players and families are looking at that and says, well where's my cut, so to speak? And so I think some changes need to be made, and hopefully they will be soon. I'm a rule follower, so that's not something that that I would participate in, but I do think things need to change.
Chris, what would you say needs to change?
I would agree with Mrs. Kale that they need to take a hard look at it. It's hard to explain to student athletes that are in middle school, high school, when they read about billions of dollars being made and off their license or et cetera, to understand where that money goes and how. And again, as you emphasize, there is a scholarship and there is other things that come with it, and they get a stipend for X, Y, Z. However, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what the institutions are making. And they have a hard time explaining that. And I think somehow if they could explain that, but right now there is no explanation. It's just there. And I think that you're getting more and more parents and students and coaches and everyone that are very frustrated with the process because each year the next TV deal for the Ncaa is going to be probably that much greater than what it is now. And it is a big problem with that. We have not had any players, that, to my knowledge anyway, that's been in that situation or have that pressure situation on them, but it's out there, and it's a major, major problem. So I don't know how to answer that for them because, as the president of Villanova said, their thing is they teach the kids about what's on their chest. And for me, we do it a little bit differently. We put our names on our back of our jersey because it's what's on your name on the front and what's on your back you have to represent, and it's as important. And we want them to brand and market both to realize it's important. So we take it a little bit differently from that aspect, and it's hard to explain to kids that, even for us, we're like gypsies, we don't have a home court, and as a result, we get taken advantage of, to play certain games and certain events, and we say yes because we have no choice, because we don't have a home base per se, but they invite us solely because of the players we have, and we are probably the largest drawing fan base in the state of New Jersey, and so it starts there, and even below that, it's a monopoly that's just absolutely out of control.
The final thing that I'd like to touch on is women's basketball. And Lou, you're the head of the girls AAU as well nationally, and you've had girls play in the summer programs, and that's obviously different since you started in 1982, the amount of television exposure and revenue, WNBA, all of these things. Does the women's game experience a lot of the same issues, or is it really apples and oranges still?
Apples and oranges. You can't, apples and oranges. The girls can look what the boys get, but that's still apples and oranges. The girls' basketball has grown a whole lot. Since I go athletically, the girls have gotten better. They compete harder. Scholarship is more. I love what the universities are doing for the girls out there. But still, girls are more realistic. And it comes down then, the girls can't leave school. They stay school 4 years. I'm telling you, that's big. If a kid knows he's going to have to go to school as a freshman, got to go to 4 years of school, kid get integrated into school. The one and done, you ain't integrating nothing but your pocketbook. So that's a big thing. So the kids now, like a young female, we have a young female in our program, go to college and go do well in school, and they go to the WNBA, and not that much money in the WNBA, so they got to get an education. Because you can't live what we make WNBA. And only a few kids can play overseas. So that education becomes much more important. And sometimes on the men's side, we lose sight of it.
For us, we have a girls program that's been in play for 6 years now, and they're evolving. And there are a lot of similarities, with the exception of the one and done, in the competitiveness. We have a lot of girls that do apply to our school because of our girls program. It's taken off as one of the better programs in the county and in the state, and that's evolving at a very rapid pace. And so a lot of the things that you identify in the boys program, you're now seeing in the girls program, the same pressure that the boys have for individual skill development. They put just as much time in it as the boys do. The travel, all those things are as important to them. The parents, it's the same mentality. I'd say from the outside looking at it, it appears to me that it's actually a little bit more competitive with the parents of girls than it is for boys.
This is really illuminating. I appreciate it. We thank you for coming, and we'll take a short time out and be back with our third panel in just a little bit.
You did a good job.
Okay, we have a shorter transition now to our third panel. As I mentioned to you before, we have with us Tony Chennault, former Villanova player, Nate Lubick, who hails from Georgetown, and Arturas Karnisovas, ex-Seton Hall player. We're going to bring them up here front, and then I'll turn it back over once again to Dave Popkin. Boy, that was some powerful panel. I thought it would be good, but it was better than good. Excellent job. So Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you again.
You guys ready?
Yeah.
I hope so.
This chair is real comfortable.
Yeah.
Fall asleep.
Okay, we're going to get started with panel number 3, and we appreciate your attention and you coming out today to the Westin. I will start on the podium side. Tony Chennault, former Villanova player, started out at Wake Forest, was a high school state champ, Pennsylvania Player of the Year, very highly recruited player. Look forward to talking to Tony about his experience. He's now a filmmaker, owns his own film company, Old Head Chris, was a popular web series, and he's now shooting a project in the Bronx. So we'll talk with Tony. Arturas Karnisovas, one of the most decorated student athletes in Big East history, 2-time Student Athlete of the Year in the league, the only person to my knowledge to have done that. Born in Lithuania and came to Seton Hall. Did you speak English at all? Some. Not a lot. We'll talk about that a little bit. Went on to play in 4 NCAA tournaments, the only Seton Hall player ever to do that, obviously for PJ Carlissimo, 2 bronze medals in the Olympics for Lithuania, worked in the NBA in operations for the Houston Rockets as a scout. He is now the general manager of the Denver Nuggets. And Nate Lubick is with us, 2014 grad of Georgetown, working on Wall Street, former high school basketball star, 2-time Player of the Year in Massachusetts, Parade All-American from St. Mark's, a boarding school in Massachusetts, also played AAU ball. So we look forward to talking to these gentlemen about their transitions and their life, high school to college, college to the professional world, and what their expectations were and how that changed. So, Nate, let's start with you. Obviously, highly recruited player. How many coaches, how many schools would you say came after you in your last couple of years of high school?
I would say probably like close to 20.
Mm-hmm.
I think my dad was a high school coach and was my high school coach, so he had been doing it for a long time, and kind of people knew what they were getting when they were starting to deal with him in my recruitment. So that kind of isolated a certain type of school, I guess I would say. But yeah, 10 to 20.
At that time, did you think you were going to play in the NBA?
Yeah, I did. I think every kid going to play college basketball at any level kind of has that dream, and the ability to maintain that dream and have that be something that you're looking to achieve is what gives you the ability to kind of power through for 4 years.
At what point did you realize that's not happening for me, and what kind of a mental process did you have to go through to say, I'm going to have to plan for another direction?
Early. Yeah, early.
That's a shot blocked?
Yeah. I would say the first time a Pittsburgh player boxed me out on the free throw line. Yeah, fairly early, I would say. And I think that I was fairly well prepared, and kind of, that was, again, part of how I chose Georgetown, how I chose, where I went to college, and I knew that I wanted to be in some form of finance for a little bit at some point in my life, so I wanted to go to a school with a good undergraduate business school, and that kind of limited the amount of schools that I was looking at. So I would say I was pretty early on, but I was well prepared to take the next step.
Tony, you were very highly recruited as well. What was that process like for you, going from, hey, I'm the king, to, hey, I'm not the king?
It was a humbling experience. Coming out of high school, I went to New McGrady High School. It's a really big time high school program in the country in Philly, and we finished #2 in the country. And then you go to Wake Forest, ACC, and then you playing against like North Carolina and Duke. And then when I transfer over to Villanova, you're playing against like Syracuse and Georgetown, and you're playing with guys just as good or better than you. So it helps you realize that, hey man, like, the NBA might not be for me, especially if only 1% of us making it to the NBA. What's going to happen to the rest of 99% of us? So it was during my junior year, after my junior year at Villanova, that I start to think about other opportunities other than basketball and playing professionally, whether it's NBA overseas.
And you left college before your eligibility was up, correct?
No, I graduated. Basketball? Yeah, I graduated in 2014. So
graduated in 14.
Yes.
So then at that point, what did you want to do, and how quickly were you able to turn that into a successful company?
It was funny. So it's a funny story. So my senior year, Coach Wright does all these exit meetings, and with the seniors in particular, and I walked in the meeting and he's talking about agents. He's talking about like where I'm gonna work out at. Like, yo, coach, I'm done. And he just looked at me like kind of stunned by it. And I'm like, I don't want to play basketball no more. I just came off some like real personal tragedies. I lost my brother, he got killed. And then a year later, my mom died. So like the personal tragedies was another factor in me not wanting to play no more. I wanted to do something where I could have a bigger impact in basketball. I could provide hope with people in my community, and filmmaking gave me that voice. And once I explained to him my reason for wanting to enter the field of filmmaker, he understood where I was coming from.
Talk about your first major film project and how that connected back to those issues you talked about and your childhood in Philly.
I did like this short film called Chris, and when I was a senior in college. It was like kind of like a thesis project for my film course, and it just basically just talks about why in urban communities we don't value life and we don't see the significance in others that we have in our life, whether it's family or friends, until they're gone. And in doing that film, I really felt like I can have a major impact. Some of the people that's in my films never acted before, and now they develop a passion for acting. And now they see that it's much more out there besides the community vices that's out there, and it gives them something else to look forward to.
Arturas, let's talk about your transition a little bit. You come from Lithuania to South Orange, New Jersey, and you meet Robin Cunningham, who is a pioneer in terms of the student-athlete experience and the academic experience. How much did Robin and the people at Seton Hall help you to transition into an English-speaking, fully functional college athlete?
Well, she helped me a lot. So as much as I spoke street slang English, that did not help me in the classroom. I was very strong academically in terms of science. And my freshman year, all my classes I took were math courses, until they told me that I cannot take them anymore unless I major in math. So it took me a year to take multiple courses just to get a control of English language. And then I took, obviously, English 1 and English 2. And, had no trouble in junior and senior year with the language.
One thing I've noticed with the different programs I've announced for multiple teams and conferences and things like this, every coach is different in terms of the experiences that they provide for their players outside of the court. I've been around coaches that like literally cut the team off from the world. You go to the hotel, you go to the arena, you never see anything. They're so concerned about dollars and cents and wins and losses and all that stuff. And then there are coaches that are completely the opposite, and they take the players to the Statue of Liberty and all these other things. And I know PJ Carlesimo was more of the latter. I've seen a lot of pictures of your team doing different things out in the community and experiencing things. How important was that to your development?
Well, I don't remember them. I mean, there were long practices, long trips. I mean, I still remember 3-hour practices then with PJ. But I mean,
do you think
long dinners? Long dinners. That was good. If we would go to the city, we would go to nice restaurants and everything else. But PJ was a very exciting coach to actually. For 4 years to have him, it was a blast.
Nate, do you think that is an important part of the student-athlete experience? And did you get any of that at Georgetown?
Yeah, definitely. I think my time at Georgetown, that was a very monumental part of the student-athlete experience, not just for basketball, but for all the sports. I think Georgetown does a particularly impressive job of creating a culture of the alumni kind of embracing the student athletes and connecting people, whether it's while they're in school or while they're after school, and making lifelong connections between the network of people that you share the same alma mater with, and whether it was doing stuff like when we were taking a trip to China, or I know the Georgetown team just went to Italy, and those types of experiences, and the school taking some ownership in not just your time at their university playing for in the Big East, but actually for the rest of your life. Like that's a very important thing, and I think that a lot of schools, particularly in the Big East, do a fantastic job of that.
There's an Ncaa commercial that says something to the effect of 99% of student athletes turn pro in something other than sports, other than basketball. And you've obviously done that, working in finance. For whom do you work? What is your day-to-day like? And how did Georgetown prepare you for that?
Yeah, so I work at the Bank of Montreal. I'm on the trading desk, so all those crazy movies you used to see, or I guess you still kind of see them. So I'm kind of doing that, just like the modern day version of that, so not as fun. And Georgetown did everything to prepare me for that. And I would say more than Georgetown, but just being a student athlete in the Big East. I mean, having the rigors of balancing a full class load schedule and a travel schedule and a basketball schedule, high major basketball schedule. Having to manage your own time and be disciplined and regimented in how you accomplish things. For a lot of kids coming right out of school, I see it with a lot of my friends who I went to school with. It's just that sense of discipline and that sense of time management just does not come very easily. And I think that when we go out into the real world, no matter what industry that we're in, we're almost spoiled by that kind of just being part of our mindset already.
Arturas, I know that you worked for the NBA with Stu Jackson and others in the room. Part of your role helping international players transition to the States and to the NBA. Let's take it back a step from that, but the same theory. There are so many more international players now in the Big East and in other conferences than there were when you started playing 25 years ago. Is there enough support for these student athletes? What can college basketball do to help these people that are coming here?
Well, I think so. I think these days they have huge staffs supporting the kids, from U.S. and international. I mean, I had a huge, from Robin Cunningham to her staff, because the adjustment is not only the language, it's obviously culture. So all the reactions, so you have to be open-minded. A learning different culture. And from my perspective, and from their perspective, obviously, it'll take me some time to adjust. So for me, my freshman year was not only, the language barrier or the, can I play in Big East or not? It was just overall cultural shock. Plus, at that time, it was a very interesting time. Obviously, I was Lithuanian, but it was part of the Soviet Union, and the country was falling apart. My parents couldn't travel, so I was obviously by myself. I didn't go back to Lithuania for like 3 years, so it was stormy times, interesting times. So it took. That was also 1990 was when the war started in Kuwait as well. So it was interesting time. So there was a huge dilemma of obviously wearing the U.S. flag on your jerseys, and there were a lot of things coming at you. But basketball court was my redemption. That's where I didn't think about anything else but basketball. And every time I would talk to my teammates, I said, the stuff on the court is easy, because when your parents are counting tanks through the window, that's scary. But you're gonna win today or you're gonna lose, it doesn't matter. So.
Unlike the others on the panel, you've gotten to stay in basketball as a player, as an executive, as a general manager now. Why did you want to do that, and how has it gone in your first year or so as a general manager?
Well, I think the idea forms, by itself. When I was in college, I didn't focus on academics, although it came to me easy. I remember sitting, I took very one of the favorite majors in business school, which was economics. There were 2 people actually graduating in economics, so finances. The administration, business administration was much more popular. But when I graduated, and in Meadowlands Arena, we had a graduation, and they would tell you a major, you have to get up. So I thought there's going to be a lot of people getting up, but there was only 2 of us. So that idea is actually forming. So obviously, I didn't get drafted by the NBA, so I went to Europe, spent 8 years playing professional there, and I think when my knee started going south and I had some health issues, I started thinking about life after your career. And around 31, I retired. Everybody was like in shock, like, you can still play. Why are you retiring? Well, I said, I want to retire early enough so I can learn and prepare myself for my next career. So I went and worked in finances for a year, actually in New York City, this company called Asante, business management firm, and then I was offered a job, work for the MBA. At that time, Stu was the head of the department. It was a pleasure working for him for 5 years, and at some point, obviously, I wanted to be on the team side, and all those ideas is they're kind of forming. You do informative interviews of all the executives, and you find your place. And I wanted to be on the team side, and I was offered to work as executive in European clubs and all this stuff, but I wanted to stay stateside because NBA was what I dreamed of. First playing, but then as an executive, and worked my way up in Houston organization, and then got offered assistant general manager with the Nuggets in 2013, and last year was promoted to general manager.
Tony, we had the Villanova president up here a few moments ago, and he talked about the culture there and Jay Wright, and I do think it is unique in college basketball, just the way that Coach Wright has been a leader with the other coaches in the conference, a leader to his players, just became Villanova's all-time winningest coach last night. Certainly a credit to the profession. What was your experience like, not only playing for Coach, but the general culture at Villanova in making you a man?
It's a great culture. At Villanova, Coach preaches playing for the guys that come before you, because he's real big on tradition and heritage there. But the thing that separates, in my mind, my personal opinion, Villanova from other schools is the brotherhood. You know, it was times coaching had the coaches, we was coaching each other because how tight we are. Like some of my teammates I played with, Javon Pinkston and James Bell, we talk every other day, and we graduated almost 4 years ago. So that brotherhood just don't stop at Villanova. It continues throughout life, and he creates that type of environment at Villanova. And personally, I love playing for Coach Wright. The one thing about Coach Wright, he's going to challenge you. No matter what you're going through in life, he's going to challenge you and push you to get better each and every day in practice. No practice was ever easy. Every day in practice he was always finding ways individually and collectively how we could get better as a team.
John Paquette or Stu mentioned earlier that you're working on a new film project in the Bronx. What is that?
It's an old head web series. We actually going into our 3rd season. It just basically give an authentic depiction to some of the social economic issues inner city youth deal with. It talks about the importance of an old head. The old head is an authority figure who passes down wisdom to the younger generation. And we actually go into our 3rd season. We acclimated over 800,000 views on our YouTube channel, and we shooting a portion of our this season in the Bronx. And I think we're close to halfway done, so we go into production later on this evening at the Leave Here. And
you've been very proactive with Kickstarter and other things to finance these things.
Yeah,
because
it's expensive.
it really is. And
I'm a starving artist.
The business has changed in that way.
Yeah.
Right? You can go out and just do it.
Yeah, you can do it with these DSLR cameras, but it's a process. Nothing happens overnight. The thing, you just have to be willing to understand that what you're doing is going to pay off at the long run. The unique thing that I miss about sports is, I'm pretty sure these two guys could attest to it, we both could go in the, all 3 of us go in the gym and make 500 shots, right? And then the following day have a good game. But in real life, you might have to have 5 good years to have that great 6th year. That's the difference. And I'm learning that as a young professional.
Nate, what's good and what's bad about college basketball right now? What would you change, if anything?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Less timeouts.
He needs a 30.
Yeah, I do need a 30. What's good about it is this stuff, I would say, is that, there are so many universities doing things the right way that, kids come out and like Tony just spoke to, and they have not just friends for life, not just, teammates for life, but they have a network for life. And I think college sports in general, that's such a massive component to the good things that come of it. And I know that I live that every day. I wake up every day and Georgetown's part of me, and the Big East is part of me. And I can't tell you how many times, even just in my work environment that, people reach out to me or I make some bizarre connection with somebody because I played basketball at Georgetown or because I played college basketball. So the ability for that to be not just something that you wear on your chest, for 4 years on the court, but for that to be something that sticks with you for life, I think that that's an invaluable to a student athlete. Obviously there's a lot of difficult things going on with the nature of recruiting right now, and that's, I wish I had a thought on how to change those things, because it sacrifices all the good stuff that comes out of college basketball, and I'm sure that there's changes coming, and I think that those who have been doing it the right way are going to stand out for a long time and have experiences like Tony and I did.
How many of your teammates, your classmates, hit the wall as you did, maybe freshman, sophomore, junior year, they realize, okay, I'm going to be a good player. I'm not going to the NBA. What percentage would you say were not proactive in networking and in preparing for a realistic life after school?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that I'm just like an anxious, stressful person about like what's next. So I was probably, if you asked like people involved with Georgetown, I was probably too proactive about doing that. And I probably drove some people insane. But I think that, at least from my experience, and I have friends who played all over at different universities, that it really depends on the school, it depends on the coach, it depends on the culture. When you have experiences like these guys have with PJ and Jay Wright, like just from hearing from people I know, that's a big part of that family, that brotherhood, that culture is making sure that it's something that sticks with you for life, and that they're going to help you just get set up at right out of school when you're not going to go play in the NBA, or you're not going to go play overseas, and again, I think it's something that's school by school, coach by coach, but from my experience, Georgetown did a particularly good job of it.
Arturas, as a general manager, how much do you look at some of the things that the other guys were just talking about? Culture, family, personality, some of the things that are not basketball related. You have a lot of international players on the Nuggets. All things being equal, apples to apples, you have two players that are pretty similar. Will you go for an international player over an American player because of culture? Will you really delve deep into their personality and their background before selecting them for the team?
Well, we scout them for a long time, and we collect information. And probably the biggest part in making decisions is obviously the background. And you go back to high school coaches and AU coaches to college, career advisors, and you do extensive family background. And we always say to our group of scouts is like, can they play? Or probably myself or Tim Conley, we'll see him play. We'll see if he can play or not. But that other information that is coming from the background, that's the decision-making process that is going to be very important. You're going to pick that guy over that guy. So I think the background information and what we're talking about, the personalities, what their values are, the camaraderie, how they appreciate team environment. I think they're very important, and they're part of our decision making when we select players.
Tony, with the 99% 1% breakdown, if you talk to players, when you talk to current players, what would be your message to them about what they should concentrate on in their 4 years or less at school?
Network, because the friends you have other than your teammates and other athletes are going to go work on Wall Street like Luke is doing. They're going to go work successful jobs, so they may help you further in your career once you get out into the real world. And I think sometimes these athletes just don't understand that when you're in the moment. When you're in the moment, it's hard to understand what your life's going to be like 5-7 years from now, because you're practicing unlimited meals, room, and everything like that, but you don't understand when you get out into the real world. Now you got bills. Now you got to pay for food. That's the difference. So I just try to be real and transparent, and I try to tell them, like, this is what it's going to be like when basketball is over. So start preparing yourself for it now.
And also the relationships actually are, besides being important, it's also a different generation. Now it's technology, right? So we also encourage our players, to talk more versus your total relationship is based on email or text. And that's what creates issues today to create those relationships for the future, I think, is because of, everything is with the device in front of you. You don't you know, you don't know if you have a brother or sister or, you know, any family details or anything there. You know, just interaction is different. You know, so.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the two of them. I mean, there's not another time in your life where you're going to be at a school with a bunch of people who, you know, number one, are around your age, number two, are, you know, trying to figure their lives out at the exact same point in time as you, and you never know who's going to impact your life, whether it be, you know, an alumnus, or, you know, somebody who you go to school with, or somebody that you play with. I think, you know, using the resources at your disposal, especially, you know, for guys who play college basketball, when you're on TV a couple times a week, like that's when you're peaking. You know, that's we're never going to get that ever again, and we're never going to be that notable ever again. So using everything that these institutions have, you know, at your disposal, I think during that 4 years is, like Tony said, when we're caught up in being a student athlete, it's very difficult to kind of picture what's going to happen to us in 10 years. But, you know, those who take advantage of it, I think, really reap the benefits.
Do you think that the Yahoo report, which has, you know, not really been confirmed, and there have been no charges, maybe just unethical versus legal, is that prevalent? Were you surprised when you saw it, and do you think it's even a big deal?
No, I wasn't surprised. No, I mean that's again, you know, all this stuff has been going on for, you know, far longer, you know, before we were getting recruited, and you know, it was always part of the business. It was always part of being a grassroots athlete. You know, I think the level of how conscious people were about what was going on definitely varies, you know, program to program, state to state, kid to kid, but no, wasn't surprised, and yeah, it's a problem. It's something that needs to get cleaned up, but again, there's so many, you know, everybody will point fingers at AAU and how, you know, the impact of the shoe companies, but the other side of the spectrum is there's so many unbelievable things that have happened because of AAU. You know, we're spoiled because of the Big East and all these major conferences, and seeing how, you know, these kids are affected in terms of their recruitment, you know, at the high major level. Well, at the other side, there's AAU, and these platforms have been, you know, paving roads for kids to go play in the Ivy League, go play in the Patriot League that would have been D3 or not even college basketball players. So yeah, there's a lot of bad things that happen, but, you know, our ability to figure out a way for the game to marry the good with fixing what's bad is what's important.
Yeah, on the whole, more positive than negative for sure. Now, Tony, part of what we've talked about, high school to college, and yes, I'll take a question in 1 second, and then college to the pros, that kind of thing, but you transitioned within college. I know that's an issue that the NCAA talking about now, coaches talking about it. How many waivers are granted? Do you have to sit out a year? Right now, most people have to sit out a year transferring between schools. Would it lead to the Wild West and continual recruitment of other people's players? As a player, would you want to just, you know, be able to transfer without the year off? Do you think that is smart?
No. Honestly, I think you should take the year off when you transfer, because you get an understanding of the system of, first of all, the team you're transferring to, and then you got to get ingrained into the culture of the school. You know, sometimes when you get thrown in right away, there's a lot of things that you might not know right away, opposed to someone who's been there 2 years. They understand the system, they understand how things work. I think it do need to be some type of standard or some type of scale to decide if this person could transfer for this reason, opposed to just transferring for basketball-related reasons because he's not playing enough. I think that's dumb, because you're not playing enough, you want to transfer. That's like saying I'm going to quit on life because life's hard. You know what I mean? You have to sometimes stick things through to figure out why you're not playing enough.
Does it penalize the player too much having to sit out a year?
I don't know if it penalizes them too much. I think it's a tough thing to figure out. You know, like he said, there's totally different reasons for for switching your situation. But you know, I think a lot of people will look at it as giving up or giving up on a school or a coach or something like that. They do need to figure out, you know, when it's, you know, a coach leaves or just something happens or there's a scandal or and you know, some of these places are holding these kids hostage when they're trying to get out of what just isn't the right situation for them. You know, there's a lot of that stuff which I think really needs to get cleaned up, but I don't think I wouldn't say that it's penalizing them too much.
Arturis, any suggestions to the NCAA? You've been on every side of it, player, executive, NBA side. Do they have it right? Is it overregulated? Is it underregulated? Can you even if it's properly regulated, can it be enforced? Like, are there enough enforcement people out there on the road at summer tournaments, at high school games? I mean, it's like impossible to track all of this down. What are your thoughts on that general situation with trying to regulate the process?
Well, besides me getting myself in trouble, I think you know, our jobs is basically to track players. Obviously, in college and now we even go to some prep school tournaments that fifth-year seniors play because they're going to be draft eligible, let's say, in upcoming draft. So there's a lot of conversations, you know, about, you know, when are they going to move the age up? Are they going to, you know, what's going to happen in college? Are they going to let players coming out, you know, high school or something like that?
What would you prefer?
Look, we're going to just wait for the league to decide, and we're going to track players, you know, whatever we can. So.
What would you say? I mean, you have tennis players that are out there, they're 14, 15, 16 years old, they're professionals, and now we're regulating when a college basketball player, whether they're 17, 18, 19, 20, can go make money. What would your opinion be as a player?
Yeah, I think they should be able to go. I think that that the, you know, the 1 year or 19-year-old cap kind of that doesn't make all that much sense. I understand why it was put in place, and I do think that, you know, we all have the right to, you know, go make a living, and college just isn't for everybody. Playing college basketball, being a college student, it's just not for everybody. So, you know, while it might not be the right decision to take that leap in the NBA for every kid, it might not be the right decision to go to college and spend a year in college for every kid. So you know, I think that kids should have the right to go earn a living and be able to support their family.
Tony, do you agree with that?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Some of these kids are coming from extreme circumstances that they need the financial gain to support their family. And I think it eliminated a lot of issues with college basketball as those guys go. Because you have, at some universities, some guys go to school the first semester and won't show up the second semester. Like, why are you here? You're not really taking advantage of the full experience of being a college athlete. So it don't really make sense for you being here other than basketball. So those guys should just be allowed to go.
Guys, continued success. You've been a credit to the league. We appreciate your time here today, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're good?
Completes our event, and thank you all for coming. Safe travels and enjoy the semifinals.
Hey, thanks. Good to meet you. Good.
Big time? All right.